Hello everyone, I'm Stigurna with Game Design Shower Thoughts. In this series, I talk about a game of my choosing and telling my opinion on it, as well as highlighting a few of my favorite and least favorite parts of the game and why I think that is the case. Disclaimer: I am in no way trying to pass off my opinion as fact or even true. It's based on my personal experience and my perception of fun. Today, we'll be looking at Splatoon, a third-person shooter developed by Nintendo. It takes place in a world where humans have been extinct for thousands of years, and now the world is inhabited by squids called Inklings, who partake in an activity called Turf Wars to compete for who can cover the most territory. The Inkling culture has its own customs, slang, and language, creating a really unique and stylistic world. Now then, with the introduction out of the way, how about we start talking about the gameplay? So, what separates Splatoon from other third-person shooters? Okay, just to clarify, just because you aren't using bullets doesn't mean that the weapons aren't deadly. In fact, this game has an extremely fast kill time, but more on that later. Your objective depends on the type of mode, but generally, they all include splatting the foes and spraying the floor in your color a lot. This is why the standard multiplayer mode is Turf War. No objective other than paint, paint, paint. Your weapons range from paint guns, brushes, rollers, buckets, and what have you. These weapons have two functions, killing and painting. The reason why painting is so important is because of a few reasons. First of all, your movement is extremely limited without your ink, and since one of the more unique things about Splatoon is that you don't really have a sprint option or anything of the sort. Instead, you have a squid form. In squid form, you can submerge in ink, making you invisible. You can also swim in ink, drastically increasing your movement speed. In squid form, you may also scale inked walls, travel across ink rails, reload, and your hitbox size is massively reduced. This design philosophy behind the squid form in ink is a mechanic for multiple things. Going into squid form is one action, and yet it has plenty of uses, including the ones I just mentioned. Game Maker's Toolkit has made an episode talking about these quote-unquote versatile verbs, which I recommend checking out if you're interested. Anyway, you can see why painting is so important now, since you having more ink than the enemy is a major tactical advantage, since you can move faster, and the enemies can barely move without first inking your turf, since you get slowed down considerably when moving in enemy ink. Turf each team actually works as an indication of map control. If an area is thoroughly inked, it's easy to assume that the respective team has control over that area. Map control is a fundamental concept in any team shooter, so it's really nice that Nintendo has tried to simplify map control, so new players can start picking up on said concepts easier. This is another reason Turf War is the default mode, since it's literally just who has more map control in the end. Painting also fulfills another purpose, charging your special. These kind of act like ultimates. They range from giving your entire team a little bit of armor, a slam dunk, or a giant laser of doom. They do vary in situational usefulness, but they are all still usable. And last but not least, we have your sub-weapons. These are grenades, more or less. Instead of having a limited amount of them, they share the same MO as your main weapon. Your sub-weapon may range from a variety of bombs, sensors that reveal enemies through walls, proximity mines, etc. They consume a lot of ammo generally, so it's better not to rely on them unless you have gear that supports that. The gear system is how you customize your character. You have plenty of different clothes to choose from, made by different in-game brands that have their own styles. These clothes also have abilities attached to them. These abilities range from increased movement speed to reduced ink consumption, etc. It took me a while to really understand the gear system and how to build my Inkling, and I didn't like it at first, but now I think it's a great way to add variety. As you play multiplayer and gain experience, you get sub-abilities on your gear, which are the same as the existing main abilities, but are about less than third as effective. These are randomized, but if you collect enough chunks by clearing out your subclothes enough times, you can place the abilities you want on your clothes. Also, you can increase your odds by going to Crusty Sean and ordering a drink, which increases your odds slightly for that specific ability. Here you can also order food, which increases your gained money or experience. Money is needed to buy new weapons and clear out your sub-abilities. Leveling up lets you buy more weapons from the shop, and when you reach level 30, you start getting sea snails, which are used to upgrade your clothes by adding additional sub-ability slots. Sheesh, that was a lot of explaining. To condense my thoughts on gear, I think that getting sub-abilities is a little bit too grindy, or at least getting the ones that you want. But in the beginning, just try to focus on your main abilities, or just how the gear looks, and not worry about the sub-abilities too much. In the end, I do like the gear system, but it isn't without its flaws. Next up, let's talk about the modes of Splatoon. You have Turf War, as previously mentioned. It doesn't really have much depth besides ink better than the other team. This one can be very annoying since the first 2 minutes don't actually really matter much. The only thing that matters is who has the control at the end, not who has the more control overall. And because of that, this just isn't that good of a mode. It's good for learning weapons and trying out certain playstyles and weapons, but that's about it. Then there are the ranked modes. Ranked is solo queue only, so no voice chat is allowed. I really like this because it means you don't have to deal with voice chat, and we all know how bad online voice chat can be. This way everyone has to deal with the same level of communication, and they don't have to listen to the toxicity the internet can provide. Then we have Splat Zones, my personal favorite. There are certain areas on the map where you need to control them by having them covered in your ink. You get points by controlling the zone, and who has more points by the end wins, or alternatively, if a team reaches 100 points, that team gets an instant knockout win. You can contest the zone by covering it with enough ink, stopping their point counter from going up. If then you get control of the enemy's area, you give them penalty points, which then they have to work through next time they get control. This lets the team who got the lead keep the lead, but still give the losing team a chance to bounce back, so when they gain the zone back, they don't immediately win. Also, if at any point the points are tied, the team who didn't have the lead have their score set to 1 point less than the leader. This is to prevent any draws. Also, if time runs out but the losing team still has control of the objective, overtime starts. Overtime's duration depends on the game mode being played. Splat Zones is a very fast-paced game mode, and it has a simple premise. Even a single person has a lot they can do to help contest the objective. That's not usually possible when playing a King of the Hill type game mode such as this, or at least not in other team-based shooters. Tower Control is a mode where you are to escort a tower by standing on top of it. You need to ink the sides in order to climb up to the top. This makes weapons such as blasters that have an explosion hitbox very useful for clearing out the tower. The map also has checkpoints, spots on the map where the tower has to stand still in order to move on. This helps defenders get a chance to defend. Moving on, we have a Rainmaker. The Rainmaker is the name of the game here, no pun intended. You have to carry the Rainmaker to the enemy base and
slam dunk it in there!
The closer you get to the enemy podium, the more points you have. The Rainmaker is protected by a shield that you need to burst. As it bursts, it explodes and inks the area around it, splatting any enemies who are caught in the blast. This makes it really important to be the one popping the shield to get that map control. The one carrying the Rainmaker isn't in sitting duck either. The Rainmaker is a cannon that shoots projectiles that explode when fully charged. This weapon can be very deadly given the correct situation and that you get if you can keep your distance. The team's job is to create a path for the Rainmaker to swim through and protect the Rainmaker's carrier itself. The game doesn't take camping with the Rainmaker very well, since it has a 60-second timer which ticks faster when retreating. When the timer runs out, the Rainmaker explodes and resets to the center of the map. The last ranked game mode is Clan Blitz. This one is my least favorite since it requires quite a bit of teamwork, which is always hard to deal with randoms, and even harder with any voice chat. I'd still rather deal with no communication than hear the toxicity my team is shouting at me throughout the match. Anyway, in Clan Blitz, each team has a basket. This basket needs to be filled with as many clams as possible. You do this by gathering clams enough until you get a power clam. Clams are scattered around the levels and they are revealed to you if the ground under them is inked. This lets you gather them much more quickly. The barrier needs to first be broken by a power clam, which gives the scoring team 20 points. The rest of the team can throw clams into the basket to further increase their score. Normal clams are worth 3 points each. Throwing a clam increases the duration which the barrier stays broken. So it's good to throw a clam to extend the duration, then work on clearing the area of any enemy players, and then continue throwing clams. Or, if you just need to get the lead, then you can just tunnel vision on the basket. You can throw clams to teammates to create a power clam together, closest to the enemy basket. This is a good strategy, since it's really hard to push forward with the power clam, since the enemy team can actually see you through walls. These modes are far more entertaining and tactical than Turf War. Turf War can feel very random in my opinion. Even though a lot of these game modes are quite similar to a lot of existing game modes from other team-based shooters, Splatoon's ink mechanic brings a unique spin to them. Splatoon's developers have done a lot of quality of life changes to make their movement as seamless as possible. For example, shooting as well as submerging into ink either on the ground or on a wall do a small splash of ink around you, creating more ink for you to swim on. In addition, a little bit of ink doesn't stop you in your tracks as you're moving through it, assuming it's mostly your ink that you're traveling on. These are very small details, but they reduce the chance of you getting stuck in ink or having to stop climbing a wall because you didn't ink a small part of the map. Other quality of life changes include getting a full refill of your ink whenever you use a special. Most players have realized this, and use it strategically as a way to quickly refill their tank, especially if it's a very quick special such as Splashdown, Bomb Launcher, or Ink Armor. But I suspect its initial use was to prevent a player's frustration. For instance, imagine that you're in a heated battle, and you activate Inkjet. You fly around trying to take as many enemies down with you. Unfortunately, someone's found your starting position and was ready to jump you, and you immediately try to fight him off as you land. As soon as you try though, the screen starts whining at you that you have no ink. The player might forget what their ink tank capacity was at the moment of activation, which could lead to annoyance. Since using a special refills your tank, this will never be a problem. Bullets have been replaced by ink as previously mentioned. This has two purposes. One, to fit the context, and what I mean by that is it supports the Inkling race. These are squids who can submerge in ink, so it makes sense that they shoot it. They also give the colorful look we have come to know and love, at least I have. The second is that it's very intuitive, and by that I mean it's extremely clear where your shots, flings, sloshes, etc. are hitting, and the inks drop off and their range. In a lot of first-person shooters and third-person shooters, it's not always so clear where your bullets come from and where they land. Sometimes your FPS is realistic ballistics, sometimes your weapons are just hit scan lasers. And sometimes that AWP player admit shoots you from his head because that's obviously where bullets are supposed to come from. In Splatoon, it's immediately obvious where danger is. Bullet whoosh sounds and big globs of ink are obvious warnings that tell you where the shots are coming from, even if you're not looking at the direction of the opponent, and potentially you may even recognize that weapon they are shooting you from the unique fire rates or spreads. If I see a sniper laser, I might mix up my movement a little, and then get to cover as soon as possible. Maybe try throwing a few grenades over at that direction. Bombs also have a phew sound at a shing, alarming you of bombs being thrown and getting ready to explode. In general, Splatoon's sound design is very good. Voice lines are silly and memorable. Shooting and hitting people gives off a satisfying sound. The loading screen lets you do silly voices yourself while waiting. And Splatoon 2's multiplayer music is, in my opinion, the worst in the series. It's still not horrible, though some tracks can get annoying, but Splatoon's music is really more of a love it or hate it kind of thing. I won't go too much into detail about Salmon Run, but I will say it's a great co-op zombie mode with an objective, randomized waves, and a very good challenge. I will say it's a fantastic way to earn money and ability chunks, but unfortunately it's not always available. Which is a shame, because it's one of the most fun modes in Splatoon, if I'm being honest. In Splatoon, the time to kill is very low. Even the weakest weapons kill you in 5 shots in most situations. Most of them kill around 3, some in 2, and some even in 1. I think when a game has low time to kill, I think it makes the game more fun, at least to me. Low time to kill means that less long fights, it means positioning is more important so you don't get caught out, and in general it means that a single individual can accomplish more. Obviously, if you engage 2 people alone, you're still likely to lose, so you have to be intelligent while carrying. I also like that low time to kill usually makes you feel more powerful and offers a more satisfying experience if you ask me. But then again, I've come off of Team Fortress 2, which is also a game where weapons can kill you in 2 to 3 shots. Splatoon's unique in-game culture as well as the art style has created a subculture of Splatoon players, the Squid Partiers. Some people like being friendly in this game, to their enemies as well as their teammates. Sometimes spontaneously people just will stop shooting each other and proceed to just party. This kind of stuff just doesn't happen in shooter games like CSGO, Fortnite. It's happened to me in Overwatch a few times, but it's few and far between. This also happens in Team Fortress 2, another one of my favorite shooters that has plenty of personality and style. There's a whole community that consists of these squid partiers sending messages out to each other in the plaza so they can make a private lobby to just hang out and take selfies and stuff. It really shows how charming Splatoon's world is. Hell, even as I was just recording turf war footage, I go to mid, all ready to fight, and suddenly, I just see a bunch of squids slowly creeping up on me. We then proceeded to party for the whole match, excluding the times this one guy kept nuking the entire enemy team. There's always a party pooper, huh? To wrap up this segment of gushing up about Splatoon stuff, I'll talk about one of the core concepts of Splatoon's overall design. So, I think one of the initial design philosophies of Splatoon's creators was fixing a problem that plagues shooter games on consoles, the aiming. Why do I think this is the case? Well, the problem is very real, at least for me. I absolutely despise aiming with a controller. You have such little control about your turning speed, it's frustrating. That's why these console games usually have some sort of aim assist to compensate for that. You can of course adapt to it with practice, but it's so much less intuitive than the traditional mouse and keyboard. So, this is where motion controls come in. Motion control has been hailed as a gimmick for a long time now, only useful in casual games. But I think one of the most praised qualities of motion controls actually has been aiming with them. In Super Mario Galaxy, the star cursor is a very nice addition in my opinion, letting you pick up collectibles from a distance very efficiently, and playing a few minigames with them here and there. Also, shooting the bow with motion controls in Zelda is, in my opinion, preferable to the alternative. Of course, Zelda went a little bit too far with the motion controls in some aspects, but that's not what we're going to be talking about right now. So, Nintendo might have realized this, that aiming was actually pretty good for motion controls, and they started to make a shooter. but they might have felt that this was too big of an adjustment to most modern players, since most aren't very used to motion controls. That's why they had other mechanics support the design philosophy of making aiming easier. So, let's start with the bottom of Splatoon's design as a shooter. What's the goal of a team-based shooter? To seize control over the objective. How do you seize control over the objective? By getting map control. And as already mentioned, getting map control in Splatoon means inking the ground. And no one can miss the ground with a weapon. Inking the ground makes enemies slower, therefore easier to hit, and you faster, making you harder to hit if you take proper advantage of the ink by swimming in it. This is actually a very valid strategy in Splatoon. Shoot the ground under the enemy so it becomes easier to hit them. This was intentional, so if players are having trouble hitting people, their misses might ink the ground below the enemy and make them easier to hit. These things make adjusting to the motion controls slightly easier. Also, this is not dumbing down the game. If I get into a situation where I can't move properly, I can shoot the ground beneath me or use a burst bomb, or crimp ink resistance to myself. So there is counterplay to this, so you can still dodge stuff.
A common one is the fact that there are only a few maps and modes in rotation at one time. Admittedly, this is quite annoying, but it also has a few upsides. I would like to argue it lets you learn the map quicker, since you are playing it more often in a short time frame. This also lets you avoid certain maps if you wish, and don't mind waiting. It is quite annoying if you want to go to League Match, a team ranked, and you guys don't like the current mode. That I understand hating. Same with Salmon Run and its availability. I might keep the rotating maps every 2 hours, but I would like if every mode was always available, ranked, Salmon Run, so you could choose out of the 4 ranked modes. The last complaint before I move on is the online service. It's pretty bad. There is big delay on registering kills, even if you're using a LAN adapter. This leads to weird game feel and sometimes gets you killed in unfair ways. Sometimes finding matches can be a pain.
The reason this is the case is not only because people might have bad internet, but also because Splatoon's tick rate is 16. Tick rate basically means how many times the server updates the status of the players to the server. Stuff like the player position, health, etc. This results in very bad netcode. To compare how truly bad a 16 tick rate is, Valve's CSGO servers are 60 ticks, and professional players complain that even that is too low for a competitive environment. A lot of people don't like the fact that you can't choose your main, sub, and special weapons individually. Instead, Splatoon gives you pre-made kits. Now, while I understand not liking the devs restricting player choice, let's look at it from another perspective. This gives devs the possibility to offer very specific playstyles to player, tailoring weapons to fit certain preferences. Let's take the Sploosh-O-Matic, for example. The Sploosh is an assault rifle that shoots faster than most other weapons in its class, as well as only requiring 3 shots to kill. This makes it one of the most lethal weapons in the entire game. The downside is that it is extremely short-ranged. Now then, what do you think would complement a weapon like this? The default Sploosh-O-Matic comes with Curling Bomb, a bomb that slides along the ground, creating an ink trail for you to swim behind, and to getting close range with the enemy, as well as getting to the fight quicker from your spawn. As for your special, you have the close range explosion, Splashdown, to make people get off you and get some close range kills. Makes sense for a weapon that you want to be in the front lines with, up close and personal, right? But what if this isn't quite what you want? Meet the Neo Sploosh-O-Matic. Instead of curling bombs and splashdown, you have squid beacon and tennis missiles. Squid Beacon is a waypoint you place on the map. You or your teammates can then jump to it afterwards, making your team's respawns faster and potentially setting up some nice flanks if you hide your beacons well enough. This complements the Sploosh surprisingly well, since it's a close-range weapon, so you're gonna be in the fray, so you have actually opportunities to place those really sneaky beacons. 10 missiles compared to Splashdown is more of a utility special. You can see the whole team as you go to fire your missiles through walls, which then the enemy has to either swim in their ink to dodge the incoming missiles. If they don't, they risk taking damage and sometimes even outright dying to the special if you catch them at a bad time. Not to mention, the entire time the missiles are flying towards the enemy, they are revealed to you. This helps make up for the lack of the curling bombs, as seeing the enemy without having them necessarily know where you are is a major advantage when approaching them. This in combination with the beacon creates a more sneaky playstyle, where you're trading the convenient movement of a curling bomb and instead setting up beacons for a future flank or just helping you and your team get back to the fight quicker. This makes getting in a lot more difficult, but when you do get in, you can set up in some very good positions. Overall, it makes for a more supportive kit compared to the vanilla Sploosh. These kits also work in tandem with the gear system to help you create your own playstyle. For instance, with the vanilla Sploosh, I would want to use swim speed, run speed, or maybe ink resistance. Swim speed and run speed are, well, self-explanatory, and ink resistance lets you walk on enemies' ink without taking as much damage or getting slowed down as much. These abilities help me get in and stick to my enemies so they can't escape my extremely short range. With the Neo, I might instead go for Sub Power, Ninja Squid, or maybe even Drop Roller. Sub Power allows me and my team to jump to beacons in record speed. Ninja Squid hides my ink waves when I'm swimming in ink, compensating for my lack of ink resistance and run speed, as well as letting me get in easier. And finally, Drop Roller lets me roll after I land from a super jump, which makes my landing a little safer. This is what I like about Splatoon's approach to weapons. Two of the exact same weapon, two very different ways to use them. I could go on and talk about more cases like this where the weapon is the same, but the kit itself creates niche playstyles. In fact, as I was making this video, Nintendo released new weapon kits, one of them being for the Sploosh. It has Splat Bomb, a basic grenade that explodes shortly after landing on the ground and has one-hit kill potential. This allows the short-range weapon to deal with mid-range opponents a little better, especially if you have some sub-power up to help you throw the bomb further. As for the special, it has Ultra Stamp, a gigantic hammer that's perfect for getting in really close. And you can also throw the Ultra Stamp at the enemy, again compensating for your lack of range. Now, someone could argue if your sub and special choices had no restrictions, someone could have made this exact kit and created this unique playstyle by himself. Not only that, but they could have made any combination in the game, opening the door to a ton of customization. And you'd be correct to think that. But there's two good counterpoints against this decision. The first is restricting your choices. Now you might be thinking to yourself, why is restricting the player a good thing? Well, it's because the more choices there are, the harder it is to find something you actually like. So instead of having to make 3 choices every time you want to switch weapons, you only have to make 1. I think this also encourages the player to try out different things more, since if they had the choice, they might just stick to 1 or 2 sub and special combinations and not try out as many weapons as they otherwise would. The second reason is for gameplay purposes. Let me paint a picture for you. You're playing Overwatch. I don't know why you're playing Overwatch, but you are. You're fighting a Genji. In your head, you know what he can do. He can throw projectiles at you that do decent burst damage. He has a dash that can be used for mobility and damage, and finally he can reflect projectiles with his sword. But what if suddenly in your fight against him, he shoots you with a sleep dart, immobilizes you, and instantly kills you? And imagine if every single hero could change his or her loadout like this. Now sure, a different sub and special in Splatoon isn't gonna have such a drastic effect on a match as the mentioned example, but my point is, your strategy against the normal Genji would be very different compared to a Genji that could have a sleep dart instead of a deflect. Going back to Splatoon, let's just describe my thought process in a match where I see that my enemy team has a vanilla Splatoon-matic. First of all, I have to think about my weapon and if it's good against that weapon. Can I outrange him and reliably beat him that way? Can I stop him from getting close to me? Can I kill him if he tries to splash down me? All these thoughts go through your head as you're playing the match. As it goes on, you'll start realizing more and more about the game. If you see a curling bomb, you might want to back off from his ink trail so he doesn't jump you from there, or shoot him as he's swimming on the ink. If you get the kill, you'll feel accomplished. If you die, maybe you underestimated the raw killing power of this sploosh, or maybe you just suck like me. Either way, this thought process was possible because you know for certain what the enemy is capable of from the start of the match. If you could choose your own subs and specials, seeing a curling bomb wouldn't matter much because anyone could have thrown it. And using an example of a special, seeing an enemy that has a special that could be anything could mean the difference between winning a fight or dying to a splashdown. Now you could argue that you could show subs and specials at the start of the match or even on top of the screen where you can see the guns. The problem with this would be there'd be extreme clutter around the top and potentially sensory overload where the player would see so many icons and as a result pay no attention to any of them, practically leaving them as clueless as they were without the icons. So in conclusion, I think the pre-made kits fit Splatoon perfectly. They help players identify their teammates and enemies' classes, while still having every Inkling and Octoling have the same body build. And I would also like to argue that there is a certain degree of pride to mastering a niche weapon kit, which makes that weapon feel more yours as a result.
Okay, maybe you don't want to play the multiplayer.
You don't have Nintendo Online? Don't worry, Splatoon still has you covered. Or does it? Something that I hear gets very little praise is Splatoon's Hero Mode, and trust me, this is for good reason. So, the Hero Mode is a single-player campaign featuring 27 levels and 5 bosses. The levels are more akin to a 3D platform than a shooter. In fact, it reminds me of Mario Galaxy a little with its cool style, and the super jumping reminds me of Launch Stars shooting you into another planet, which I kind of like. It gives that little Nintendo vibe, you know? Right off the bat, I have to address this. If you don't care about how the hero clothes or hero weapons look, I suggest not bothering with this mode if the first few levels don't seem like your kind of thing. The campaign is just so long-winded and boring. This is due to a multitude of reasons. Reason number 1. The levels are simply just too long. The levels can take up to 10 to 20 minutes on your first playthrough, depending on your skill level. And if you game over on a level, you need to start the whole level from the beginning. In today's gaming world, this kind of experience can be fatal to your player, since it might just make them rage quit and stop playing. I know some of you that have already been the single player mode, perhaps even multiple times, are telling me that any people who would rage quit this are bad at the game or whatever, can't beat levels, but just ask yourself, what does the game over system actually bring to the table? And you might be saying that game overs, they're classic. They've been around ever since, you know, the NES days. But you know what was also very common in the NES days? Shitty games. And I'm not saying that you're not allowed to punish your players, but I'm saying if that punishment is too harsh and it doesn't lead to a satisfying payoff, then something needs to change there. Not every single game has to be a Dark Souls boss where you have to just grind at it and then get the satisfaction. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's move on to reason number 2. Reason number 2, lack of variety. Oh my god, the lack of variety. We have a whopping 2 kinds of levels if you're not counting the bosses. Your usual get from point A to point B, and then you have the Octoling levels where you have to collect 8 red coins, mini Zapfish. These mini Zapfish are guarded by AI-controlled Octolings, and they take place on existing multiplayer maps that have just been slightly adjusted to account for the positions of the Zapfish. I don't have much else to say on them. There are only, I think 4 of them in the entire game anyway. The majority levels are the normal obstacle course type levels, and they're filled with unique gimmicks for you to overcome, and some of them are actually fairly clever. But it's just not enough to save them from feeling repetitive. It's always going from A to B. Then we have the third type of level, the boss fights. I think the designs are actually pretty cool. We've got a toaster oven. We've also got an ink shower. I like those designs, but I just don't think they're quite difficult enough to be satisfying. And the shower is extremely annoying for certain weapons when you're trying to unlock them, due to him being so high up. And these boss fights are made with the classic Nintendo boss formula I'm sure we've all heard of. Avoid the boss's attacks until you find an opening, hurt the enemy, and repeat the process 2 times. And sure, they'll mix you up a little, they'll add some new attack patterns, but pretty much you'll be doing the same thing. And that's not necessarily bad, it's just, it doesn't help with the already existing lack of variety. And let's move on to reason number 3. Collectibles are lame. The single-player campaign has 3 kinds of collectibles. Power eggs, which are basically this game's throwaway collectibles. You can get these from pretty much everything. Killing enemies, breaking boxes, they're scattered around the levels, etc. The second kind are sardines. You find these hidden inside levels at certain spots, and you can only find 1 per level. I think there's another way to get them, but I can't remember for the life of me. You use these 2 collectibles in tandem to power up your weapons and buy new sub-weapons at the hub. The problem with the upgrade system is you don't get nearly enough of these resources to upgrade your weapons often. It's especially disappointing because some of these upgrades make you feel really strong and make these weapons borderline broken. And I think the earlier access to these overpowered weapons could have helped with the game's fun factor, because feeling powerful and feeling badass is fun. That's why Dynasty Warriors has the fan base that it has. You're just a one-man army wiping out hundreds and thousands of enemies, and it's sure you can say that it's mindless, but you can't deny that there is definitely an appeal to Dynasty Warriors. I know I went off track by this, but it's just to showcase that feeling powerful is something that can apply to a lot of games. The third and final collectible are these sunken scrolls that actually give you a little bit of backstory to the world of Splatoon. I doubt everyone's interested in this stuff, but I can see some people totally eating it up, and I personally think that it's a fun little extra. Unfortunately, these collectibles are really annoyingly hidden, and thanks to the Mario Galaxy-esque level design, you're not allowed to backtrack. So if you want to find those sardines and scrolls, and you notice that you missed them, you'll have to replay the map again and search every single nook and cranny. It's not challenging, it's just tedious. And adding to the tedium is the fact that you don't actually get anything for the main game by playing the single player. You only get the hero clothes and hero weapons, and that's when you either beat the game or beat every single level with the weapon that you want. And I probably don't have to tell you why that is a bad idea. These three things combined make a mediocre experience that I had to force myself to beat. I'm glad I did though, because the credit sequence is actually really great. It's a scrolling wall where the developer names are made in graffiti, and you have to paint the wall to actually reveal them. And you get to throw bombs and spray ink, which have contrasting colors. I think this is one of the best credit sequences in video game history. Even though the hero mode is pretty flawed, I'd still say that it has a few redeeming qualities. Callie and Marie are just fantastic characters, and I love the dialogue that they have. It's just a shame that there's so little of it. In fact, one of my favorite parts of the hero mode is when you've rescued Callie and you get to talk to her and you get to hear some unique dialogue if you refight the boss fight after you've saved her. Another thing that I like is that on top of having this really impressive looking canyon, you can actually see all of the other areas while you're in these hub areas. You can even see the final area. And all of this tells me that even though the end result isn't the greatest, that Nintendo really tried to put everything they could into this thing. Oh fuck. Anyway, my point is that it still has redeeming qualities. For example, I noticed that when you try to beat the levels as fast as you can, the game actually gets a lot more fun. I think this is because, well, first of all, Splatoon's movement is very creative and unique, and it's because you're clearing the levels a lot faster, so you don't feel such a big lack of variety, and the game doesn't feel that much more long-winded when the levels only take 2 to 5 minutes instead of 10 to 20. You can even see that they encourage this kind of play fast movement through having record times and shortcuts in the level that, if you notice, Marie will actually compliment you. Regardless, some levels don't have shortcuts at all, and some still just are not that much fun. This moving platform level can kiss my ass. I'm about done with hero mode, but first, before we move on, I'd like to highlight my favorite mechanic from it, ink rails. I really like these because, first of all, they bring something to the table that you can't do in the main game. It's a mechanic completely unique to single player. Secondly, it brings a new angle of gameplay. Since you're not in control of your forward momentum, you need to pay attention to what's coming in front of you. And third, I think it's just a really cool way to travel. Levels utilizing ink rails definitely were a highlight for me, the Octo Galaxy being my absolute favorite level in the game. It uses ink rails a lot and rewards quick thinking and timing in addition to being a fun challenge. It also has a lot of shortcuts, but slower alternatives if your reactions aren't on point. Not to mention, it has an insane music track playing, which is another thing that the single player does really well, the music. I think it's actually better than anything the multiplayer tracks have to offer, if we aren't including the off-the-hook songs. Another thing that I like about the music is the hub world music actually gets more intense as you progress to the different areas of the game, adding instruments and just generally making the tune much more intense when you reach the final area. So what's my verdict on hero mode? Well, as I said, I'd say try beating the levels as fast as possible and ignoring the collectibles. And if this just doesn't interest you, or you don't like how the hero gear looks, I say pass.
Yes! You've been received! Tony!
On the 14th of July 2018, Nintendo released the Octo Expansion, a single-player campaign that was sold for $20. If you know me personally, you're most likely tired of me talking about the Octo Expansion, because it's the best paid DLC I have played personally, and I've been just talking about it non-stop. Well, actually, this has changed at the time of me writing the script to me just gushing about it about Xenoblade, but hey, that's gonna be next time, okay?
Now it's right time.
Octo Expansion takes into account the flaws of the hero mode and makes something truly unique and excellent. So, you might ask, how is this Octo Expansion different from the normal single player? Well, let's start from the beginning. Captain Cuttlefish wakes up your Octoling character underground. In the story, this happens sometime between the events of Splatoon 1 and 2. This is confirmed by the Splatoon 2 campaign, since Marie actually mentions finding him in a chat room, of all places. Anyway, you start looking around the underground to look for a way to get back to the surface. You eventually find a telephone that tells you that you are in the Deep Sea Metro, a subway system filled with tests for test subjects to perform. Their reward is a trip to the Promised Land, which, as the player, you know as Inkopolis. So you and the Cap set out to clear the tests and collect 4 things to get to the illustrious Promised Land. Shortly after entering the metro, you're introduced to Sea Cucumber, which is the conductor for the metro, as well as Pearl and Marina via a device the telephone got you. The reason I didn't talk about the story in the hero mode segment of this video is because there really isn't much story to begin with. And what we have here is already a much more interesting atmosphere and story compared to that of the hero mode.
It's not much, but it establishes a goal and the characters. The game's atmosphere reminds me vaguely of Portal, what with the quirky AI character, test chambers, etc. It's a very simple story, but it works thanks to the charming dialogue, likable characters, and the fantastic presentation. The Octo Expansion's art style is a combination of retro, neon, and street looks. It's a really fresh aesthetic, no pun intended, and it works beautifully. Add a little bit of abstract things like floating Game Boys and other things, and the fact that you're constantly underwater, resulting in these water surface patterns all over the place, and you get one of the most unique art styles I've seen in a while. And again, it fits so well. Now let's start getting into the meat of Octo Expansion, the gameplay. Instead of multiple hub worlds where you have to search for the levels, you have a few subway cars and a branching map of the subway system. I personally like this approach much more. It keeps a breakneck pace going, which was one of the complaints I had with the original hero mode, and the subway car has a surprising amount of life in it, with plenty of different NPCs riding the metro with you, in addition to having multiple backgrounds as you progress into the other subway lines, which is, again, nice attention to detail. And then there are the levels themselves. They are basically small challenges, like destroy the targets, reach the goal with a limited amount of ink, survive a certain amount of time, and much, much more. The great thing about these levels is that they're usually focused on one mechanic, and really fleshing it out, then moving on. This variation really keeps the player from getting bored, which was a big problem in the original single player. They are also far more challenging than the hero mode levels, keeping the player more engaged. Another improvement is that if you fail a level, you only need to pay an extra toll, and you get to continue from the last checkpoint. This is to make sure you don't need to replay big chunks of levels. And another reason why this and the next thing I talk about are good additions is since the difficulty is much higher, you're more likely to lose all of your lives, obviously. It throws a bone to the player, not punishing the player too harshly. And, if you fail a level enough times, Marina lets you cheat your way through the level so you can proceed, at the cost of not getting that level's mem cake. And no, they're not meme cakes. These cute little things are collectibles that you can view at the subway, and each of them come with a little poem, presumably written by your Octoling. Collect enough of these and you get exclusive gear for the main game. So basically, we have this mode's version of the Sunken Scrolls, but they also give rewards, not just cool stuff to read. Speaking of reading, as you progress,
you get to read chat conversations between Pearl, Marina, and Cap. This was an excellent addition and has some of the most quirky parts of the story, like when Marina teaches Cap how to type, and when Pearl actually falls for the good old Alt F4 trick. This is also where you find out the most about Pearl and Marina as characters, so be sure to check the conversations whenever they're available. The only remaining rewards that you get as you play Octo Expansion are the CQ points. These let you enter the levels themselves. You get them by completing levels and by collecting power eggs. When you enter a level, you're sometimes given a choice of multiple weapons, some making the level harder, but giving you more CQ points in return, creating a risk versus reward situation. This is a better way to handle choosing your weapons than what Hero Mode does, because instead of having to design a level in a way that all weapons can do it, you only need to design it so a few certain weapons can do it. This leads to more creative uses of your weapon in the level itself. CQ points are also used for a vending machine that you get after you beat the game, where you can spend said points to unlock stuff for the main game, such as tickets, money, and ability chunks. I imagine the reason for locking this off after you beat the game is so people wouldn't recklessly spend all of their money, forget that they needed to progress in the tests, and force the player to do a grinding session. And that's the great thing about Octo Expansion. All of these mechanics that I've mentioned appeal to all players, all kinds of players. The amount of levels and letting you choose the difficulty of some of the levels appeals to completionists and high skill players. The level skipping and branching paths help low skill players to not get stuck, and so they can still beat the game by avoiding tougher challenges. That's the great thing about offering a choice to skip the level. The people who love a good challenge are going to do the level anyways, even if it takes them a while, because that's what's fun for them. Nintendo really went above and beyond to make Octo Expansion really have its own identity. From the pretty loading screens, menu, the gameplay, and yes, I'm saying it, the music. The music of Octo Expansion is easily my favorite music in the entire series. It has less of those weird squid noises, but the soundtrack has plenty of variety, and they're just really great tracks. When you really start to look at Octo Expansion and Hero Mode and start comparing them, I think it's evident that when Nintendo were making Hero Modes of Splatoon and Splatoon 2, Nintendo were experimenting with their game to find out what works, and the Octo Expansion is the result of what they learned. All the main three reasons that I listed in the Hero Mode segment are all taken care of here. And I think the result speaks for itself, because everyone who I've met and has played the Octo Expansion loves it. Not all of my friends have played it because of the rather steep pricing point at $20, which I'm just gonna say this because I think it needs to be said. DLC is not bad. DLC is actually really good, and it's a fantastic idea. Why wouldn't you want more of your favorite game? The problem is that people use it in a very bad way. But this is great use of DLC, and I think this was easily worth $20. Now then, before I talk about the ending of Octo Expansion, I would like to highlight some of my favorite parts of the expansion. The idea to design levels for having the player just use Baller and Inkjet was genius. Baller works perfectly for the Samurai boss, and levels with a time limit, offering, again, that all-important variety. And the Inkjet has a lot of depth to make levels out of, and they took great advantage of it. They just added a little speed compared to the normal Inkjet, which leads to very fun movement. My personal favorite levels are, surprise surprise, levels that utilize ink rails again. Ride Race's Rails Station where you have to destroy all the targets while jumping from rail to rail. It really gets my blood pumping. Stick and Move Station is a short and sweet test where you need to shoot targets to make these car washer things move, making a safe path for you. If you manage to collect all the squid rings in a section, the game rewards you with Power X and Pearl and Marina complementing your skills. Radical Rail Station decides to use rails in a different way, making a kind of rail system where your targets are attached to spinning pucks that ride the rails with you, and you also need to switch rails to get higher to reach some of the hard-to-reach targets. Okay, Jesus, I've said rails way too many times, so let's change into talking about something else. Crate Buster Station is absolute murder on my hand, but it's a really fun challenge and intense. You basically just have a bunch of crates and you have to destroy them in a time limit, and some of the sturdier boxes have specials inside them that you can use to clear the level faster. One of the more infamous ones is Ride With Me Station, where you are
Riding on cars!
and need to hop from car to car to advance, and at the end you have a Flappy Bird clone where you need to shoot a propeller to keep the car at a certain height to avoid dying. Overall, a very unique level, and my god, it has ink rails. 10 out of 10. The last station I'll mention before moving on is Freakazoid Station, where you need to get to the end of the level with a sniper. The level allows you to choose from two different snipers. The Goo Tuber, a sniper that lets you actually hold on to your charge by submerging in ink with a full charge, and the other, more challenging one, is the Bamboozler, which is just a sniper that lets you charge very fast. Now, these levels have a lot of mechanics that have to do with your movement. Boost paths that send you flying, these ink rails, or whatever you call them, but basically you can travel in them if you submerge in them. Now the game wants you to use these movement options to get close to something and shoot it to proceed. But the problem is with snipers is that they charge very slowly in the air, and they need to charge in order to actually get proper range. So, these two snipers handle the situation in two very different ways. The Goo Tuber allows you to hold on to your charge longer than other snipers, letting you charge, then go to squid form and approach the target and fire. The Bamboozler, on the other hand, thanks to its faster charge time, has just enough time to charge enough range to let you proceed. This requires better accuracy and timing, but of course gets you a higher reward if you were to beat the level. Not only do these two weapons offer a different gameplay experience, but also character interactions are different. See, the storing your charge mechanic is completely new to Splatoon 2. So if you pick Goo Tuber, Captain Cuttlefish is amazed from your stored charges, since back in his time, in Splatoon 1, they weren't a thing. But if you choose the Bamboozler, the Captain's favorite weapon might I add, he instead comments on its fast charge rate and how you remind him in his good old days, which I just find a really nice attention to detail once again. Okay, now it's time to talk about the actual best part of Octo Expansion, the final stages. After you collect the 4 things, which funnily enough turns out to form a blender, Telephone AI guy tries to make Agent and Captain Cuddle soup out of you, but then you get saved by Agent 3, the player character in the first Splatoon, and then is conveniently out of commission. Cap stays with Agent 3 and your Octoling starts to head for the surface. And this is where the hype train really gets started. You start off with the stealth section, since you don't actually have a weapon. This section is mildly challenging, requires some patience from the player, but it's a nice change of pace that doesn't overstay its welcome either. After this section, you start hearing Off the Hook's music. This is supposed to convey to you and your character that you're actually nearing the surface and your phone device map thingy starts playing it, but really it's just an excuse to get to hear some hype music. The second section continues with you having no weapons, so you have to bait enemies to blow up boxes that are blocking your path and avoid enemies the old-fashioned way, until you find bombs. This lets you progress to a different part of the level, until you finally find a weapon and proceed to the third section. The third section consists of you climbing up falling glass rectangles. And damn if this isn't one of the coolest looking areas in the franchise. Nothing much else to say here except they twist the idea at the end, making the rectangles move horizontally instead, and have you dodge 10 missiles on them. The fourth section is a short but sweet one where you dodge lasers. I really like this one as there isn't really anything else quite like this in the rest of the game, and I just kind of feel badass inking walls and jumping through specific patterns. Also at this point I would like to mention that if you fail these sections enough, just like the normal levels, you're allowed to skip these sections for no punishment. Not anything worth complaining about, since if you're good enough at video games you'll most likely do the level for the satisfaction itself, and if you really can't beat it, then you can skip it. The fifth section is my favorite one. It's a level where you exclusively use an inkjet and have to collect 8 data cores, and as you collect them, they release a power source that you need to get to the surface. As the cylinder opens up, it also lets you get higher and higher on the cylinder, eventually reaching the top. This one's my favorite because you can take many different routes through it and grab the data cores in a different order. And plus, the inkjet is fun. They really took full advantage of the verticality the inkjet provides, which leads to the fact that this is a great section to replay, since you can take many different routes through it. The sixth section is basically an escort mission, where you shoot the power source to move forward and protect it from harm. Thankfully, any enemies still aim at you, so all you need to do is focus on not being in the line of fire of the orb and taking them out. Again, all of these levels bring variety. They're all very different. And in combination with the music, it really does have that feeling of finality that an ending should have. The seventh and final section is a one-on-one confrontation with a possessed Agent 3. It's easily the most interesting AI fight in the game. Splatoon builds up Agent 3 as a person who is far stronger than your Octoling, since she pretty much saved the world in the first game, and it was partly thanks to her that your Octoling, as well as Marina, turned from a bad guy into a good guy. And here you are, facing the legendary hero from the first game. Her superior strength is demonstrated by her being able to roll, use specials, and being able to come back from death once in the fight. The fight is rather enjoyable, and is a nice story beat to end off the escape from the deaths. Also, if you collect all the mem cakes, you get to fight Inner Agent 3, a 5-phase battle that's much harder than the normal fight, accompanied by the classic Calamari incantation. This'll take you a while to beat. Your Octoling burns her retinas seeing the sun for the first time in God knows how long, and being given a lift from your local pop sensations. To commemorate the escape, Pearl and Cap do a celebratory rap until they notice that the platform they just surfaced from was actually a statue of a human. They actually foreshadow this by naming the phases. Yes, they're called phases, not sections, before you guys go in the comments and tell me that my whole video is wrong because of this one point, but I know someone's gonna do it anyways as a joke now, so I'll see you in the comments, you little fuck. But yes, the phases are named according to human body parts, and even in the transition screens, the phases vaguely look like organs. Anyway, as the human statue reveals itself, the telephone AI goes about wiping all of Inkopolis because the Inkling cared about such trivial things as straying fresh and waging war because of differences between the Octo people and Squid people and... Wait, did my Squid Game just get political on me? Anyway, Tartar, that's the AI's name by the way, goes on to say that his new race, made from primordial sludge that he created from all the testing of Deep Sea Metro, is going to be the ultimate life form. But first, he needs to start from scratch by creating a blank slate. He's gonna do this by firing a gigantic beam to destroy all of Inkopolis. After Marina does a cute little Photoshop doodle plan about inking the whole statue so you can stop it from absorbing solar energy, they send you to do the most badass turf war of your life. And it really is a turf war. You have 3 minutes, the music gets more intense in the last minute, and there's a bar clash at the end. Only difference is, well, you know, you're fighting for the survival of Inkopolis with this one. And holy calamari, this is a perfect climax to the campaign. It's a tad on the easy side, but I like it since it gives you enough room for error so you can take your time figuring out how the fight works on your first go. Marina launches super suction bombs on certain spots of the human in certain intervals. Your objective is to shoot all the bombs to stop it from charging. It's a lot of fun traversing this gigantic statue shooting down bombs, and the music is one of the best songs in Splatoon history, for sure. The fight's also rather forgiving, since even if you fall from somewhere, you most likely can climb back up using the ink from your bombs that you've already detonated, so you don't actually have to paint a wall to get up. This final boss is such a big improvement over any boss in the original Hero mode. It's so creative, it's really Nintendo, it's got perfect visuals, perfect music that just gets you so hyped up and builds up to this amazing ending. It really is the perfect end to a really great DLC. Not only do you have this great final boss, but afterwards you get this amazing end credit sequence with this beautiful shot of Inkopolis and the destroyed statue, accompanied by Into the Light, another amazing track. So nice that it actually made me tear up, and I know I'm not the only one either. It's perfect for reminiscing about the adventure you went through to get to this part, and at some point you remember that this is a freaking Nintendo game for ages 7 and up. When I picked up Splatoon 2 at the start of this year, I never would have thought that it was a game that would have made me cry. But that's just Nintendo's magic, I guess. The game clearly has so much love and creativity put into it that I can't help but admire the developers of the game. They pulled off a fantastic multiplayer experience, and then, through trial and error, released a single player that holds its own. The only big issue I have with the game is that you're not allowed to reset your progress if you want to replay it. If you want to do that, then you would either have to destroy your save data, erasing your multiplayer level and gear in the process, or buy the DLC a second time. I don't really know what else to critique it on. It sets out to do exactly what it wants, to deliver a unique single-player experience, and that's what it does. And it does it better than any shooter I have ever played. So, in conclusion, Splatoon 2 offers both quality online and offline experiences. It's such a unique shooter that it's tied with Team Fortress 2 as my favorite shooter of all time. It's not perfect, as I've already told you, and definitely has some frustrating experiences, but the aesthetic and the gameplay are just so unique that it's just a really great experience. From the outside, it may seem like Splatoon is a casual game for casual gamers, made by Nintendo just so gamers could splooge all over the place, and I think that is part of the appeal. However, there was just so much depth there that I didn't expect, and that depth is what has been keeping me playing for 300 hours, even though I bought the Switch for Smash. Anyway, that's enough thinking, and I need to start showering some more. This has been Stigurna with Game Design and Shower Thoughts, and I thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Hey, sorry, I just wanted to have a few words with you before I go for real. This was meant as sort of a pilot for this series, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Unfortunately, summer vacation is starting by the time I'm recording this, and between all the work and time with family I'm planning on doing, I might not have time to make one of these for quite a long time. The next video would be of Xenoblade Chronicles. I hope to see you guys again though, and special thanks to my friends and teacher for motivating and inspiring me to keep going and finally finish this video. Peace. You can contest the jump by... It's a lot more difficult to choose from a menu that has 5 courses compared to one that has 50. Wait, no, that's the 5. Even though I don't think it's the best single player campaign, it's definitely it's definitely really? Oh, Christ. But yes, the phases are named according to human body parts, and even
And that depth is really what kept me going for 300 hours playing Splatoon, even though I bought the Smash for Switch. I mean, the Switch for Smash. Fuck.
Commemorate their escape, Pearl and Cap do a celebratory lab. Celebratory lab. Nice. Fucking hell.